Mr. Administrator, thank you very much for taking the time. We're really grateful for your service. A lot on your plate before you got this job, and you're doing a heck of a job in this job. And I was honored to stand with you as we watched the Artemis II take off from Kennedy Space Center, and there you were at the landing as well. And just a tremendous success for NASA, and really it's a testament to the entire team at NASA for making this happen. And I think the leadership shown by our chairman as well and others, and we could not be more thrilled with what's happening in space right now. But as you know, we face a major challenge from China. And specifically, you put out some very bold idea, which is appreciated. I think the energy that I sense in talking to so many folks at Kennedy Space Center, where I represent, is not only contagious, but is growing. And it's just a thrill. Could you walk me through some of the changes as we get ready for Artemis 3 and some of those actions and the standardization of the SLS rocket and why you think this is the best path forward for us to win this new space race against the communist Chinese?
Oh, I absolutely appreciate the question, Congressman, and I do want to talk about that competition for a second. This is not necessarily like the 1960s, where it turns out in hindsight we had almost unlimited schedule margin. No one's been back to the moon since Apollo 17, when American footprints last set foot on the moon. This is different now. I say it often that the difference between winning and losing will be measured in months, not years. And that should create a sense of urgency, and that should cause us to rethink some of our historic approaches to get extremely focused. You know, prior to having a geopolitical rival, I don't blame us for spreading thin at times and trying to, work with everybody and try and, bring goodwill around the world under our mission. But when you do have a competition, you do not want to lose. So I would say, yes, we have outlined some ambitious and bold programs. That's what we should do at NASA. But most importantly, sir, I would say we've outlined achievable plans. So Artemis 1 flew uncrewed November 2022, didn't fly again until April 1st of 2026. That is not a good cadence for that rocket. That is a very complicated rocket, 5 prime contractors. I don't know how many subcontractors in it on decades-old designed hardware that people aren't as familiar with. You need muscle memory to do that. So our proposal coming out of it is, let's get back in the business of launching moon rockets with frequency. Let's standardize. Why would we launch this 2 times and then do a dramatic departure to the upper stage of a completely unproven piece of hardware that's, I think, $4 billion or so over budget? Why don't we work with the OEM that was making it, that acknowledged there was some shortcomings here, and pick something from one of their JVs that's in production, that's got decades of flight heritage, put that on top of the rocket, standardize the launcher, launch again in 27. So we're borrowing from the playbook that worked for us in the 1960s, not jumping right from Artemis 2 around the moon, waiting 3.5 years to land on it. Launch again, rebuild muscle memory in 2027, test the interoperability of the Orion spacecraft and the landers in low Earth orbit, where if something goes wrong, you're not all the way out there 250,000 miles away. You're just a couple hours from being in the water. Learn from that, and then get incredibly good. Rebuild core competencies so we can turn that launch pad, not in years but months, so you have 2 at-bats in 2028 to make sure we get to the landing before our rival does. And in parallel, sir, we want to be on the moon, not above the moon, looking down on the Chinese. Gateway was an interesting concept in 2017 when we weren't faced with a Chinese rival that could potentially beat us back to the moon. Now we want infrastructure on the surface. We want American standards on the moon for power, for communication, for mobility and logistics, for crewed rovers, uncrewed rovers, surface improvements, and habitation. And I think working to get that infrastructure on the moon in parallel, so when our astronauts land in 2028, they can get in their rover and drive around their moon base is the ultimate priority.
And just for my quick question as well, it's not as sexy as going to the moon, but infrastructure is very important. Yes. It's the wherewithal so we can do this not only from Kennedy Space Center but other places as well. Are you open to the idea, as our previous questioner from the other side talked about, these public-private partnerships are so important, and we know we have so many infrastructure needs. If you just visit, of course, those locations, are you open to the idea of the private sector making those investments with NASA if that serves our purpose as well?
Absolutely, Congressman. I think that people often ask, what's different from the 1960s moon race versus the present, and there's certainly a lot of differences, but one of which is that the taxpayers don't have to foot the entire bill. I mean, you're talking almost 4.5% of the discretionary budget during the Apollo era. Now we're at a lot less, but you have some of the wealthiest individuals and companies in the world contributing their resources to a capability essential for American leadership in space and, frankly, for all of humankind. And if they want to come and invest in launch infrastructure that can help enable a capability critical for national security, I welcome it, because honestly, sir, if this trajectory continues, we're going to need to make use of, you know, every inch of the land at Kennedy Space Center, Vandenberg up in Alaska, Wallops, and who knows, in the years ahead, we might even need an entirely new set of launch complexes out there.
Well, thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and thanks for your pragmatic leadership.
Thank you, sir.